Sechas Nazir Daf Yud Ches contains two primary sugyas. First, the Gemara briefly wraps up its discussion of a question asked by Rav Ashi. The Gemara will bring a final proof and end that conversation. And then the Gemara will introduce a machlokes tanaim about what happens when a Nazir becomes Tameh and he wants to restart his Nazirus after he becomes Tahar again. Does he start on day 7 or on day 8? The Gemara will bring a brayso that has a machlokes tanaim on the subject. The Gemara will try to explain each of the two opinions, what their sources are, what each one will do with the other one's sources, some other tanaim who get involved, and how certain mishnayos and braysos line up with these two opinions. So let's begin. Rav Ashi had asked a shayla: when a tamei person takes a vow of Nazirus, does he have to take a haircut? We know that if a Nazir Tahar becomes Tameh, he needs to take a haircut as part of his Tahar process. He has to bring karbanas and has to take a haircut. Question is, what about a Nazir who makes his Nazirus already B'tumah? Does he need to do the haircut procedure now? So the Gemara concludes finally that he does not have to, from a brayso which learns that out of the pasuk describing the Tahara procedure for a Nazir B'Tahara who became Tameh. Brayso says as follows: based on the pasuk that says "V'timei rosh nizroi," describing the procedure by which he becomes tahar, by which a nazir becomes tahar, it says, and if he became tamei, if this nazir became tamei in the first place, if it says "V'timei," it's rosh nizroi, that implies that he became tamei. And then he has to remove his hair, that is, he has to take a haircut, and he has to bring a karbanas. So says the Mishnah, the fact that it says he became Tameh shows that it's talking dafka about a Nazir who began his Nazirus B'Tahara and then became Tameh, to exclude a Nazir who began his Nazirus B'Tumah and then became Tahar. Now, the Mishnah says you see this because the fact that it says it that way, and the reason that the pasuk had to be phrased that way to exclude a Nazir who began B'tumah, because you would have thought that it's a Kal V'chomer. A Nazir who began B'Tahara and then became Tameh has to take a haircut and bring a karbana, so you would think, so Kal V'chomer, somebody who was Tameh the entire time, was even worse, would certainly have to take a haircut and bring a karbana. Since you would have made that Kal V'chomer, it specifically says only somebody who is V'timei rosh nizroi, who was Tahar and then became Tameh during his Nazirus, he has to bring these karbanas and has to take that haircut. So the Gemara concludes this is a clear proof that a Nazir who took his vow of Nazirus while he was already Tameh does not need to take that haircut. We already knew he doesn't have to bring a karbanas. Now we've proven he does not need to take that haircut. We now get into the next sugya, which is the question of when can a Nazir began B'Tahara, became Tameh, now he's Matahir himself. It's a 7-day procedure. He has to have the water of the Paraduma spritzed on him. Becomes Tahar at the end of day 7. He can go to the mikvah during the day. It becomes Tahar at the end of the day. And then on the 8th day, he has to bring karbanas. Now, his haircut, he has to take on day 7. The karbanas, the 2 tziparim, he brings on day 8. So the question is, when does he restart his Nazirus? His entire first Nazirus was canceled. He has to start over again. What is the day that begins? This is machlokes tanaim. Rebbe says it begins on day 8, the day that he brings his karbanis. Rebbe Yehuda says it begins on day 7, the day he takes his haircut. Now, what is the source of this machlokes? So the Gemara explains it's how you read the psukim. The pasuk says v'kidesh is roishoi bayoim hahu. So Rebbe says v'kidesh is roishoi bayom hu. It also says, the Gemara brings further later, the Gemara says v'chaper al nefesh, and then it says v'kidesh es roshei. So the day when the kapara happens, says Rebbe, is the yom hahu, is the day that he starts counting again. So that's the day of v'kidesh es roshei. V'kidesh es roshei means that you start the new Nazirus. So you see, it's the day of the kapara, so it's the day of the karbanas, which is day 8 of the Tahara procedure. Now, Rebbe Yehuda says, no, it's not the day of the karbanas, it's the day of the haircut, which is day 7. So, it says v'chiper and then v'kidesh, that it's a day of the kapara. The day of the karbana seems to be the day when he starts. So, Rebbe Yehuda says, but then why does it have to say bayem hahu? It should say v'chiper v'kidesh. Extra phrase bayem hahu is to move the day. It's to tell me it applies on that day. Which day? the day of the haircut. How do you know the day of the haircut? Because it couldn't be referring to the day of the kabbanos, because it would have said it without the phrase bayamahu. So bayamahu is moving it to the day of the haircut. When it says bayamahu on that day, it's referring to the haircut, and therefore the new Nazirus begins on the day of the haircut. So Gemara asks, what is Rebbe going to do with the phrase bayamahu? So Gemara says, simple. Bayamahu is to include the day of the karbanos before the actual karbanos. Wouldn't say bayamahu. I would think it's only after the v'chipar, after the karbanos are actually brought. But the beginning of the day before the karbanos are brought, you can't start the nazirus. Therefore, as soon as the day where it's roi for the kapara, bayamahu teaches me, as soon as it is the day, it is the 8th day, the dawn of the 8th day, when it's roi for kapara, beginning of the 8th day, the Gemara will soon discuss if it's nightfall or by dawn. As soon as the 8th day begins, it's the Yoimahu, it's the day of the kapara, then you could bring those karbanos, and therefore the Nazirus begins on that day, not after the actual karbanos are brought. Okay, so we have this machlokes between Rabbi and Rabbi bar Rabbi Huda. Now the Gemara says, earlier we quoted a brisa, and we also have a Mishnah, which seem to take sides in this opinion. One is going like Rabbi, one is going like Rabbi bar Yehuda, and it's Rav Chizda who lines these up. So the brisa that seems to go like Rabbi is the brisa that says that there is no difference between a Nazir who makes his vow of Nazirus Betuma and a Nazir who is tahar at the time of his vow and then becomes tameh. There's no difference between the two, except for this. The Nazir who made his vow of Nazirus while he was tameh, he begins his next Nazirus. He actually starts Nazirus. It would be the first one. He actually starts counting Nazirus from day 7 of his tahara proceeding. Once he starts with the paraduma, day 7 he could start. And the reason is because there's no karbanos. So you don't wait for the day that it's mechaper. He doesn't bring karbanos if he made his Nazirus betuma. However, the Nazir who was tahar and then he became tameh, he has karbanos. Therefore, could he only start on day 8, the day when his karbanos are brought. So says Reb Chizda, this is clearly Rabbi, because the Rabbi Yehuda would say no. Even the Nazir that starts bit tahara and then becomes tameh, even though his karbanos are on day 8, he doesn't start his Nazirus, his next Nazirus on the day when he brings karbanos. He starts on day 7, and this price clearly says not the way it says. It's on day 8, the day that the karbanos are brought. Okay, now Reb Chizda brings a Mishnah that goes like Rabbi Yehuda. This is going to require a little bit of in. It's not mafurish. So the Mishnah says as follows: if somebody becomes tamei multiple times, he only brings one set of karbanos. Doesn't have to bring multiple karbanos. That is, a Nazir becomes tamei, then becomes tamei again, even if it becomes tamei a third time. He only has to bring one set of karbanos. Doesn't have to bring a whole bunch. Says Rav Chizda, what's the case here? When did he become tamei? If he became tamei on day 7 or earlier, that is, if you want to say that this is Rebbe, and he became tamei on day 7 or earlier, so he didn't start his next Nazirus yet. So why would I have a Havamina that he brings 2 karbanos? He's still in the same tumah as before. His tumah didn't end. Even if he went to the mikveh already, his tumah didn't end. He's still tamei. What is there to talk about? So for sure, the Mishnah couldn't be referring to that when it says that you only have to bring one set of karbanos. Now, if it's referring to when he became tamei on day 8, and again we're in Shitas Rebbe, so he already started his new Nazirus. So why should he only have to bring one set? His tumah ended, his new Nazirus began, it becomes tamei again. It's a whole new tumah for a whole new Nazirus. Of course he should have to bring a new set of karbanos. So what's the Mishnah's case where it tells me that it's a chiddush that he only has to bring one set of karbanos? So says Rabbi Chizda, it must be that this is the opinion of Rabbi bar Yehuda. And now it makes a lot of sense, because he begins his new Nazirus on day 7 when he's still technically tamei. So since he's still technically tamei, we're talking about after he went to the mikveh already, but before the sun went down, so he's still technically tamei, although he finished the procedure. He's still technically tamei. Therefore, you may say that it's one long tumah, but since his new Nazirus already started, you may say that it's a new tumah. So it comes to teach me, since he's still technically tamei, he doesn't have to bring another set of karbanos. I'll bring the karbanos the next day, and that'll be fine. Now he does have to wait another 7-day period because he became tamei again, but he does not have to bring multiple sets of karbanos on day number 8. So now the Gemara asks, why do you have to say that this is Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda, and that's the pshat? I'll tell you that it's a Rebbe, and I'll tell you that there is a pshat where the Mishnah is a chiddush. What's the pshat? He became tamei again for the second time on the night between day 7 and day 8, and that's beautiful because now he's out of his original tumah, but he didn't bring his karbanos yet. The karbanos he can only bring during the day. You can't bring karbanos at night. So he didn't bring his karbanos yet, but his tumah ended. Since his tumah ended, it's a chiddush to tell me that he only has to bring one set of karbanos. And the reason he only has to bring one set is because he didn't start his new nazirs yet, because he couldn't bring his karbanos yet. So why is Reb Chizda taining that this can't be Rebbe? I just told you how it could be Rebbe. Somewhere says maybe pshat is that Reb Chizda holds as follows. Reb Chizda holds that Rebbe at least holds that karbanos really could be brought at night. This is a technical halacha. You're not allowed to bring karbanos at night, but it doesn't mean it's not called a zman haroi karbanos. It's not called mechusar zman. There is a technicality that karbanos cannot be brought at night, which prevents them from being brought, but it really is the time of the carbon. Therefore, Rebbe would say that this is called a zman haroi lekarbon, and therefore it is the beginning of the new naziris, and the new naziris period starts at nightfall at the end of day 7, beginning of day 8. And therefore it would not be true that he only has to bring one set of karbanos if he becomes tamei at this point, because he should have to bring a new set because he started his new nazirs. So the Gemara answers no. The Gemara says no, it's not correct what you're saying. The answer is that the naziris only starts in the time which is roi for karbanos, and that could be whichever way. We don't know if nighttime counts as a time which is roi for karbanos, or just as a technicality that it can't or not. Whatever it is, whatever the time will be, that's when the naziris begins. So on the tzad that the nighttime is roi for karbanos, then the naziris begins at night. So then he already started his new naziris. So it's not going to help you that he's tahar already. His new naziris already began, and there's no way to say that he's not chayav a new carbon if it becomes tamei at this point. If, however, you want a taina that that nighttime, you can't bring karbanos, it's not right for karbanos, and his naziris doesn't start yet, so then I would still tell you that it's not called zman that's roi for karbanos, and if it's not zman that's roi for karbanos, the new naziris didn't start, and you wouldn't have a chiddush. The Gemara now brings 3 additional opinions. The Gemara brings a brisa. First opinion is Rabbi Eliezer. He holds that if the person becomes tamei a second time on day number 7, because he's still in his first tumah, he does not have to bring another set of karbanos. If he becomes tamei a second time on day 8, because he's already ended his tumah, he does have to bring another set of karbanos. However, he does say that you can start the new naziros on day 7, like Rabbi Yehuda, on day 7, even though if he becomes tamei that day, he doesn't have to bring new karbanos. If he starts on that day, he can start the new naziros on that day. Someone tell Rabbi Yehuda, Xeris Akasov. Now, the second opinion that the brisa here brings is the Chachamim. The Chachamim say that he actually can't start his new naziros until day 8, and if he becomes tamei on day 8, it depends when he becomes tamei. If he becomes tamei before he brings his carbon chatas, he hasn't ended his tumah, and he hasn't started his new naziris yet, and therefore he doesn't have to bring a new set of karbanos. If, however, he becomes tamei after he brings his carbon chatas, now it's too late, he has to bring a new set. Rabbi Shmuel ben Yochanan ben Breika is very similar, except instead of being about the carbon chatos, he says it's about the carbon chatos and the carbon asham. He has to have brought both of them because he can't start his new naziris until he brings both the chatos and the asham. The Gemara now wants to analyze these opinions more deeply. We said before that in learning the pasuk, it says the phrase bayem hahu. So next the phrase bayem hahu, that has to be marba to include something. So Rabbi Yehuda had said that's to tell me that you start the new naziris on day 7. Rabbi had said that you start on day 8, even before the karbanos. So Gemara asks, according to the Rabbanon here, that you only start after the carbon chatas, You only start the new Naziris after the Chata, so it can't be including before the Karbonis. So what's Bayemahu for? So since Bayemahu is to teach me that it's before the Karban Asham. Even though you didn't bring the Karban Asham, you could still start the new Naziris. Now Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi ben Breika says, though, it has to be after the Chata and after the Asham. So what is the Bayemahu to teach me? So Gemara answers, that's to teach me that even though it's before the Karban Oila, you have to bring a Chatas, Asham, and a Oila. Once you brought the Chatas and the Asham, you start the new Naziris, even before the Oila. That's the phrase Bayemahu. So Gemara says, what are the Rabbanan going to do with that? How do they know that you could do before the Oila? So Gemara says, no, let's say you don't need a pasuk to teach me you could do before the Oila. The Oila has nothing to do with the Kapara. The Oila is not ending his Tumah. The Oila is just Stam, it's a gift. Ke'ilu Kaviyachal Tarkadosh Baruch Hu. But it's not an actual part of the kapara, and therefore there's no tzad. I do not need the pasuk to teach me that you can start the new Naziris before the Karban Oila. So now the Gemara asks, but hold on a second. If you look at the pasuk, it phrases that the new Naziris begins before the Asham. It says, "V'hizel Hashem misimei nizroi." Maybe Kefes ben Shnasei la'Asham. First it says that he could start the new Naziris. It mentions the Chatas, and then it says he could start the new Naziris, and then it mentions the Asham. So why do I need the pasuk Bayemahu to teach me that you could start the new Naziris before the Asham? The Seder, the order of the Pesukim, teaches me that I could start the new Naziris before the Asham. So we're back to our original question, what's Bayemahu for? So Gemara says, no. If you look carefully, the Pesukim seem to indicate that the Naziris are dependent on it. Because all Karbonis Asham and the Torah have kapara depending on them. You can't get a kapara without bringing the Karban Asham. But here it says, V'hizir l'Hashem misimei nizroi, v'hevi keves ben shnasai l'oila. That's to teach you that even though it was not yet v'hevi, you can still do v'hizir. You can start the new Naziris before the v'hevi. So that's why you don't say that here. Now, Rabbi Shmuel ben Breika, though, says, no, it's not how you read it. You read it v'hizir v'hevi. When do you do v'hizir? Only when it is already v'hevi. And therefore, you can only start the new Naziris after you've already brought the Karban Asham.